Mr. Greedy by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Greedy liked to eat. In fact, Mr. Greedy loved to eat, and the more he ate, the fatter he became. And the trouble was, the fatter he became, the more hungry he became. And the more hungry he ate, the more he ate. And the more he ate, the fatter he became. And so it went on. Mr. Greedy lived in a house that looked rather like himself. It was a roly-poly sort of house. One morning, Mr. Greedy awoke rather earlier than usual. He'd been dreaming about food, as usual, and that made him wake up feeling hungry, as usual. So Mr. Greedy got up, went downstairs, and ate the most enormous breakfast. This is what Mr. Greedy had for his breakfast. Toast, 2 slices. Cornflakes, 1 packet. Milk, 1 bottle. Sugar, 1 bowlful. Toasts, 3 slices. Eggs, egg 3 boiled. Toasts, 4 slices. Butter, 1 dish. Marmalade, 1 pot. When he finished his enormous breakfast, Mr. Greedy sat back in his chair, smiled a very satisfied smile, thought, "That is a delicious breakfast," he thought to himself. "Now, I wonder what would be nice to have for lunch." He decided to order and work up an appetite for lunch. He would go for a long walk. That morning, Mr. Greedy walked and walked and walked. Then he discovered a cave. "That's funny," he thought. "I don't remember seeing that there before." Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of fellow, decided to explore. He entered the dark cave. Inside, he discovered some giant steps leading upwards. Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of fellow, decided to climb them. They were very steep and very difficult to climb, but with much huffing and puffing, Mr. Greedy climbed up and up. At the top of the steps, Mr. Greedy came to the door. It was the biggest door that Mr. Greedy has ever seen, and it wasn't quite shut. Mr. Greedy, being a curious sort of fellow, decided to see what's on the other side of that door. So Mr. Greedy squeezed himself through the crack in the door, and that's an amazing sight. The biggest room in the world. Pussy Willow. Egads. The floor was as big as a feet. The table was in the middle of the floor, and it was as big as a house. And the chairs around it were as high as a tree. Mr. Greedy felt very small. Then he sniffed. Coming from somewhere on the top of the gigantic table was the most foody smell that Mr. Greedy had never smelled. Mr. Greedy sniffed again and then decided that he must get onto that table. So he began to climb up the leg of the enormous chair. It was very difficult and it took him a long time, but eventually Mr. Greedy stood at the table. Eventually that was larger than life. The salt and pepper pots are as big as pillar boxes. There was a bowl of fruit at the table and Mr. Greedy tried to lift one of the oranges. And Mr. Greedy, being Mr. Greedy, took a bite of the apples there. Then he looked around. One of the other side of the table stood the source of that delicious smell. A huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal plate, and on the plate stood enormous, gigantic, colossal sausages the size of pillows, and huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal potatoes the size of meatballs, and huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal piece the size of cabbages. Mr. Greedy being hurried across the table, and the fight of being Mr. Greedy began to eat. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the plate, and Mr. Greedy found himself being picked up by a giant hand, and looking into the eyes of a real-life giant. "And who," thundered the giant, "are you?" Mr. Greedy was so frightened that he could just only manage to squeak his name. Mr. Greedy, he squeaked. The giant laughed the laugh as loud as thunder. Greedy by name and greedy by nature. He boomed. Well, I think, Mr. Greedy, that you need to be taught a lesson. And what a lesson it was. The giant made Mr. Greedy eat up everything on the huge and gigantic cluster plate. When he had finished, Mr. Greedy felt very ill indeed, so he would burst at any minute. Now, said Giant in a much quieter voice, do you promise never to be greedy again? Oh, yes, moaned Mr. Greedy. I promise. Very well, said Giant. Then I let you go. Mr. Greedy climbed down the table and went out of the door and feeling very fat and extremely miserable. And do you know, from that day to this, Mr. Greedy has kept his promise. And do you know something as well? Mr. Greedy doesn't look like he used to be anymore. He now looks like this, which I think it suits him a lot better, don't you think? So, if you know anybody who's as greedy as Mr. Greedy used to be, and you know what to tell them, don't you? Beware of giants. Okay, this is not attack. It's some food I want to eat from I think he doesn't want to eat my birthday cake. But actually, it's my birthday that's coming soon in 2 weeks. Eat. No food that's mother poop is cat. Can someone fix my eyes? I think I just ate my broccoli for dinner. Well, not exactly. I ate it for lunch. But actually, I think my head kind of looks like an eggplant. But actually, I think it's some egads. I like a fish. Why would you do that? I think summer wheeze is terrible. You fuck.